Attorney General and Keebler Elf doppelganger Jeff Sessions recently announced the creation of a religious liberty task force that gives people who are religious even more power in this country than they already have. Now, even though the prevalence of religious dogma has thankfully continued to decline over the years, well, as you can see by these findings from Gallup, the overwhelming majority of the country still identifies as either a Protestant, Christian, or Catholic, and a slim majority of people still say that religion is very important to them. But in spite of all the facts, in spite of those statistics, Jeff Sessions frames Christians as a marginalized community in justifying this particular task force. As Lydia Wheeler of The Hill explains, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced Monday that the Department of Justice is creating a religious liberty task force. Sessions said the task force will help the department fully implement the religious liberty guidance it issued last year. The guidance was a byproduct of President Trump's executive order directing agencies to respect and protect religious liberty and political speech. Sessions said on Monday that the task force will ensure all Justice Department components are upholding that guidance in the cases they bring and defend, the arguments they make in court, the policies and regulations they adopt, and how we conduct our operations. Sessions said the cultural climate in this country, and in the West more generally, has become less hospitable to people of faith in recent years, and as a result, many Americans have felt their freedom to practice their faith has been under attack. We've seen nuns ordered to buy contraceptives. We've seen U.S. senators ask judicial and executive branch nominees about dogma, even though the Constitution explicitly forbids a religious test for public office. We've all seen the ordeal faced so bravely by Jack Phillips, he said, referring to the Colorado baker who took his case to the Supreme Court after he was found to have violated the state's anti-discrimination laws for refusing to make a cake for a same-sex wedding. Sessions said the guidance he issued in October lays out 20 fundamental principles for the executive branch to follow, including the principles that free exercise means a right to act or to abstain from action, and that government shouldn't impugn people's motives or beliefs. Religious Americans are no longer an afterthought, he said. So every single thing that he said in trying to justify this religious liberty task force, it reinforced this idea of Christians are the victims. It's the Christian persecution complex, where if they're not able to impose their views on you, then they're the victims. So what he's saying here is religious individuals, people of faith, well, they're increasingly under attack as the West has generally become less hospitable to their views. But when you go to the examples here that he cites, like the Colorado baker who was sued for refusing to make a cake for a same-sex couple, which is, by the way, a service he offers to heterosexual couples, so it's a clear-cut case of discrimination. Well, according to Jeff Sessions, the lawsuit against him constituted an attack on his religious freedom. It's not that this baker is in the wrong for using his religion as a justification to discriminate against same-sex couples, it's that really he's the victim. So this is basically the idea that evangelicals have been promoting for decades now. And really, what this is about is discriminating against members of the LGBTQ community. And I think that the author of an article from the Daily Beast named Tim Tiemann really does a great job at laying out how this religious liberty task force will function in practice. If you are opposed to marriage equality or just dislike or disapprove of LGBT people generally, the Trump administration just gave you the green light to go ahead and refuse to serve them in your businesses or help them with medical care. If an LGBT person wants or needs to use your service, no problem. Tell them to shove off. The Attorney General is right behind you. So in other words, if you're a gay or trans person and your physician refuses to treat you on the basis of your gender or sexual identity, well, that's just religious liberty. If you go to a store and you're denied a service that heterosexual couples or heterosexual individuals are otherwise offered, well, you're not being discriminated against. That's just religious liberty. And if you try to push back against that notion, then you're discriminating against Christians because you're not allowing them to discriminate against you. Do you see how this backwards logic works? He's essentially advocating for us to tolerate intolerance, and if we don't tolerate intolerance, then we're not welcoming of Christianity and the views of religious individuals. So for those in the mainstream media wondering how an administration headed by a serial adulterer who's openly mocked Mike Pence's religiosity and violates everything evangelicals previously purported to care about is able to maintain support of religious people in this country, it's because of things like this. He's given them an abundance of policy concessions, and this is why evangelicals support Donald Trump. This is why they are one of the most loyal voting blocks in this country with regard to this administration. It's because of things like this. He's the individual in this country that has been maybe even more successful than George W. Bush at actually carrying out policies that appease Christian fundamentalists. And Donald Trump might actually get what evangelicals have wanted for a really long time, the overturning of Roe v. Wade with the Supreme Court appointment of Brett Kavanaugh. So that's why they love him, and they're never going to leave his side. But I mean, in spite of all of this, his supporters will still claim, his diehards really will claim, that he can't possibly be an enemy of LGBTQ people because he once held up an LGBT flag. So that automatically makes him an ally. Well, you could put lipstick on a pig, and guess what? It's still a pig. So what's happening here is we're all being gaslighted. All of us are being gaslighted. He's telling us that this is about religious liberty, when really this is about religious supremacy and the power of religious individuals to still discriminate against marginalized groups. And it's a thinly veiled agenda that you don't have to dig too deep to find. That's what the Keebler elf has been pushing for throughout the entirety of his career, and he's not going to stop now. In fact, he's going to capitalize on this opportunity now that he has power, now that he's the Attorney General, to do what he's been wanting to do all along. Make America the Christian equivalent of Saudi Arabia.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.